So yeah, if I wasn't already completely done with this book and this series, I definitely am now. There are 3 more books after this one, each of them averaging about 700 pages. I'm not joking, 700 pages per book, and I cannot and will not do that to myself. I love myself and respect myself too much to do that shit.
So that was a lie. Actually, that's not entirely true. At the time, 2 years ago when I first made that video, I am sure that I meant what I said. But obviously, here I am, filming this, and here you are, watching this, and something's changed. Part of it is the fact that I guess I just don't love myself and respect myself as much as I thought I did. And when I first published that review, it was very exciting to see all of these comments, some of which agreed with me, and some of which really did not. I got a lot of feedback from after stands, some of which wrote entire dissertations defending the book in my comments, others of which just got straight to the point. But I have to admit, despite the dissertations and despite the threats of violence, the most common comment that I got on my after video was some variation of, you can't judge this first book because you haven't read the rest of the series. I'm not joking, I got so many different iterations of this same comment. Now at the time, as I mentioned, I had some self-respect. But you know, since quarantine and the pandemic settled in, that's pretty much gone out the window. At the time, whenever anyone suggested to me that I should read the rest of the series, my answer was always the same. I hated the first book. Why, oh why, would I continue to put myself through that torture and read the next books? If there are multiple books in a series, then every single one of those books should be able to stand up on its own. In what world does it make sense to sit there and tell somebody, yes, I know that this series is 10 books long, but if you just push through and you get to like the 6th book, it becomes so good and the characters develop so much you won't believe it. Like, who has the fucking time? The answer to that question is me. Now that I'm in quarantine and the pandemic has really settled in, I have zero self-respect and self-worth. So that is the perfect recipe for me to read the entirety of the After series. So to all those After stands who said that I couldn't judge Hardin because I didn't understand his trauma, or that there were certain characters that I liked now but wouldn't like in the future, and that I had to read the entire series to truly comprehend the magnitude of Tessa and Hardin's love story. I bet you thought I wouldn't do it. I bet you thought that I wouldn't rise to the occasion. But here I am. And here you are. Look at me. Look at you. Look at us.
Look at us. Hey, look at us. Look at us. Huh? Look at us. Say it again. Look at us.
Honestly, as much as I disliked After, I have to give it just one compliment, which is that I finished that book so fast. There's something about the mess, the chaos in that book that you just can't pry your eyes away. It's like a car crash. You have to watch it. So here's to hoping that I fly through these books and don't prolong the torture any more than necessary. And you know, some of you are probably sitting there like, Daria, if you know that you're gonna hate this, then why are you doing it? Let me reiterate, I am so bored. I need something. I need something to make me feel something. And if that something is After, and if that something it makes me feel is hatred and frustration, I'm fine with that. So before we get started, let's go ahead and calculate just how much time I'm going to be spending reading this series, shall we? The second book in the series, After We Collided, clocks in at 19 hours and 14 minutes. The third book in the series, After We Fell, clocks in at the longest runtime of 24 hours and 37 minutes. The last book in the series is a respectable 15 hours and 21 minutes. And yes, I said last book, but there is a little spin-off called Before, which is after from Hardin's perspective, because that's exactly what we wanted. And that one comes in at 10 hours and 46 minutes. Okay, so after a quick round of calculations, I discovered that the grand total of minutes that I will spend listening to the After series is 4,198 minutes, which comes out to about 70 hours of audio listening, which in total is about 2.9 full days of listening to After. Okay, so before I go ahead and get started, I figured that I should give you guys a little bit of a recap of the first After book, which I will not be reading because, as I mentioned, I've already read it. And if you would like to watch fetus, baby, 18-year-old Daria rant about After, I will go ahead and link that somewhere in the cards up above. So we have our main character, Tessa Young. She's about to go to college and be away from her overbearing mother and her boyfriend for the first time in her life. Tessa meets her roommate, Steph, who wears short skirts and has tattoos. Oh my god, what a rebel. Tessa is eventually introduced to one of Steph's friends, Hardin, who also has tattoos and wears leather jackets. Oh my god, what a bad boy. Tessa goes to a college party with Steph and Hardin, and during a game of Truth or Dare, she is dared to kiss Hardin, and she runs away because she's too embarrassed and doesn't want to do it. Hardin takes Tessa to a secret spot hidden away in the woods, and no, surprisingly, he doesn't axe murder her. Instead, he gets her off for I'm pretty sure what was the first time in her life. Congratulations, Tessa. After this little incident, Tessa thinks that her and Hardin are dating, and then Hardin says, no, I'm sorry, I don't date, and then she's heartbroken, and then she goes back to her boyfriend, whom, yes, she's been with this entire time. Noah comes to her dorm and stays the night, and then that night Tessa also gets a call from Landon, who I forgot to mention, but he's Tessa's friend. He's an okay guy. He calls Tessa in the middle of the night and says that Hardin is on a drunken, violent rampage, and somehow it's her responsibility to come and fix it. And guess what? That's exactly what she does. She shows up, and then they get down to sexy times again. Tessa once again does not tell her boyfriend that she's cheated on him. Hardin gets pissed, he tosses Tessa to the wayside, but of course, it's not long till they make up again. Tessa then meets Ken Scott, who, you won't believe it, is Hardin's father, and he's also the chancellor of the college they're attending. He invites Tessa over for dinner, and of course Hardin has no table manners and freaks the fuck out at the dinner. And of course Tessa is right there to help him through his tantrums. What a great babysitter. I mean girlfriend. The next morning, they go back to the dorms, and what do you know? Noah is there. He obviously has found out about the cheating, he gets mad at Tessa, he yells, Hardin intervenes, and then inadvertently says that he loves Tessa, and then because of that, Tessa tells Noah to leave. And so obviously they're broken up. And then, this is where things get really messy. Ken has some connections in the publishing industry and manages to get Tessa an internship, but in return he asks for Tessa to please try to get Hardin to come to his wedding to his new fiancé. And oh, did I forget to mention, Landon's mother is engaged to Hardin's father. Hardin finds out about this agreement and gets pissed and leaves Tessa alone and goes to hang out with his friends. Tessa eventually tracks him down, and what do you know, Molly is sitting in his lap like the slut she is. Tessa starts another classic round of Truth or Dare. She kisses Zed, Molly kisses Hardin, and it's all just a mess. Tessa runs away, Hardin chases after her, and in one grand romantic gesture declares his love, and she rejects him. She then agrees to go on a date with Zed and kisses him, but she can't do anything more because she realizes just how deep her feelings are for Hardin, and she goes back to them. They confess their love, and they do sexy things. They go back to Tessa's dorm, and what do you know, another surprise! Tessa's mom! She demands that her daughter break up with this hooligan, but of course Tessa doesn't do it. They both go back to Hardin's apartment, and they have sex for the first time. Tessa then agrees to move in with Hardin, but Hardin is exhibiting some strange behavior, and yes, stranger than all the other behavior he's exhibited thus far. Other things happen, but they don't really matter. What actually matters is the final revelation in this book, in which Tessa finds out that apparently Hardin struck a bet with his friends that he could take her virginity. And how, you may ask, did he prove to his friends that they actually had sex? Well, this is the real clincher. Hardin saved the used condom and bloody sheets from their night together in the trunk of his car and showed it to his friends. I really wish I was joking. And apparently Hardin has been threatening, and I believe even paying off his friends to keep quiet about the whole thing. And the book ends with Tessa dramatically running away, jumping into Zed's car, and driving off as she leaves Hardin in the dust. So there you have it, a quick, or maybe not so quick, recap of After. Now that we're all on the same page, let me go ahead and jump into After We Collided. Full disclosure, I have attempted to read this book twice before, and both times I have stopped at the exact same place. I made it a third of the way through this book. Twice. That's not twice. Twice. And now, not only am I going to attempt to read that same section a third time, I am now going to push through and read the whole damn thing. So, for now, I bid you adieu, and I will return when I finally reach that cursed 1/3 mark. Okay, so I'm about 3.5 hours into this audiobook. Can you guys see that? 3.5 hours in, I have another 15 hours and 45 minutes left. And it turns out, the previous times I've tried to read this book, I actually didn't get as far as I thought I did, because I have officially reached the place that I would always stop at the times before when I tried to read this book. So I actually never reached the 1/3 marker of this book. And you know what? I cannot blame my past self, because what I have borne witness to is astounding. The majority of the book so far has just been Tessa thinking, how can he have betrayed me? How could he have done this? Yada yada yada. Hardin trying to get her to forgive him. Tessa ends up going on this trip to Seattle with the publishing group that she works for, Vance Publishing. Apparently the CEO, Christian Vance, is so in love with her and her work that he invites this random 18, 19-year-old intern on this very important trip. So she goes along with this girl named Kimberly, who is like her boss, I think. She's dating Vance, and she also works at the publishing group. And this guy named Trevor, who I think is another intern. They go on this trip, they go to Seattle, and then one night they go to this club. Apparently, Mr. Vance is so well known and so famous that he gets into the VIP section of this club. Maybe I'm underestimating the power and sway of the publishing industry, or maybe I don't know anything about clubs, but how is this man, whose only claim to fame, I believe, is running an independent publishing company, how is he getting into a VIP part of a club? Anyway, Tessa gets super drunk at the club, she's making out with dudes, she's grinding on dudes, she's calling up Hardin and telling him that she's making out with dudes and grinding on dudes. And then later in the night, she goes back to her hotel room, and then Trevor, who obviously likes her, and she's kind of like attracted to him a bit, he shows up and says, hey, we accidentally switched phones, I grabbed yours, you grabbed mine, can we switch back because your phone is like blowing up? And of course, it's Hardin, who just won't stop calling her. And of course, while Trevor's in her room, Hardin picks that exact moment to pound on her door. Hardin shows up and threatens physical violence against Trevor, and then Trevor is so freaked out that he runs away. And then Hardin and Tessa start fighting, and then Tessa basically tells Hardin, you can either have sex with me or you can leave. And she doesn't really allow him to give her an answer before she's like trying to take off his clothes. And then they have sex. And never in my life has a sex scene made me more uncomfortable. And it's not just because the things that they were saying to each other and even doing to each other was so like cringy and not sexy at all. It's because the consent was, how do I put this, dubious at best, and I hate that word, I really do, but I don't know how else to describe it. Tessa is wildly drunk, okay? So many times before Hardin showed up, she was saying that if she had just another drop of alcohol, she would be passed out. So that's not great. And then when Hardin shows up and he is like, wait, stop, she keeps going. Honestly, I just don't understand why Anna Todd decided to have their first sex scene after that huge betrayal be this, where neither party was really giving full and enthusiastic consent or could. Anyway, choices were made by the characters and by the author, and none of them were good. And now I'm going to add to that list of bad choices by continuing to listen to this book. Okay, hi, hello, I am back, and I have finished After We Collided. And I have some notes. So let's start off with the fact that this book had no plot. You could easily argue that Tessa and Hardin end up in the exact same place emotionally and in their relationship as they were at the start of this book. Literally all these two do is fight and fuck and fight and fuck and fight and fuck, and then wait for it, they fight and they fuck again. That's it. And I am a fan of romance. I'm a fan of erotica, okay? But the problem is that the sex scenes in this book, they weren't even good. The dirty talk was cringy. It made my insides shrivel and wither away. The descriptions were absolutely not sexy. In every single book in a series, there has to be some kind of progression. With the characters, with their relationship, there has to be development. And so you know what? I actually have to applaud After We Collided for throwing out the rulebook and deciding to give us nothing. Absolutely nothing. So given that there really isn't a plot to this book, I am just going to tell you guys some of my immediate thoughts and reactions. And one of the points, in fact the main point I want to make, is that Hardin Scott is a raging, volatile misogynist. He sees and treats Tessa like a piece of property. He constantly wants to know where she is. Anytime that they are in one of their broken up phases, he wants to know who she's sleeping with, who she's out with, who she's dating. Also, we find out that this man has a history of criminal activity. Hardin tells Tessa that when he was like 17, 18-ish, when he was living in England, he and his friends had this bet going where basically every single week they would dare each other to like hook up with girls, and whoever hooked up with their girl first like won some kind of prize or money, and they would send each other pictures as proof. Now, I don't believe it was specified whether or not these pictures were taken with the girl's consent, but then Hardin said that one time he had sex with this girl named Natalie, and he filmed it without her consent and without her knowledge. That's a crime. That is a crime. You are a criminal. You should be in jail. And then one of Hardin's friends shared the video, and it went viral, and everyone in their community knew about it. The girl lost her scholarship to go to university. Her parents kicked her out of their house. And maybe there will be some delusional stans in my comments who say, yeah, but Hardin didn't send the video like someone else did. He still recorded it. without her consent, that is a crime. Say it with me. Criminal. That is criminal activity. That is a criminal offense. He should be in jail. And here's the thing about Hardin. He didn't even feel bad about it. He didn't feel bad about what happened to Natalie. He told Tessa that it was just a bit of fun for me. I didn't really care. And the only time that he can empathize about what he did to Natalie is when he imagines Tessa in Natalie's position. I'm sorry, to anyone out there who may be confused, if your only way of empathizing with a woman is by imagining your girlfriend, your sister, your mother, anyone that you're related to or have a relationship with in a compromising position, you don't actually care about women. You should be able to empathize with her even if you know nothing about her because she is a human being. But that is just asking too much of Hardin. And I know you're probably wondering, holy shit, how did Tessa react to this information? You're probably thinking, okay, well, maybe she needed some time, maybe for the remainder of the book she stayed away from him, maybe it took like a month for her to forgive him? No. Okay, then maybe like a week or something? Yeah, no. A day? That would be nice, but no. She forgave him in one night, less than 24 hours. And the real joke is that it wasn't even her apology to accept. But of course, Hardin needs redemption, and later on in the novel, he just randomly runs into Natalie, and she's doing great for herself. She's getting married, she has a kid on the way, she hugs Hardin and forgives him for what he did. The jokes write themselves. Another thing that was just so hilarious to me, and by hilarious I mean deeply concerning, the book, and by extension I imagine the author, kept trying to reassure us that Hardin was okay. He was a good guy because he never actually physically hurt Tessa. Like all the time Tessa is like, I know that he would never physically hurt me. I know he would never do that. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, but he still gaslights you, emotionally manipulates you, and is a deep-seated misogynist. Okay, the next thing I'm gonna bring up is something that probably isn't going to bother a lot of you guys, but it really bothered me. Hardin and Tessa constantly comparing their relationship to Darcy and Elizabeth from Pride and Prejudice. First of all, how dare you? And second of all, how dare you? Like, the amount of references honestly makes me think that the author thought she was writing some kind of modern day Pride and Prejudice, and that Hardin and Tessa are like a modern Darcy and Elizabeth. And honestly, you guys, I can't even laugh about this because it is that offensive to me. As someone who has loved Pride and Prejudice my entire life, how dare you ever compare Hardin Scott to Mr. Darcy? They are not in the same league, okay? At all. If anything, Hardin is a modern day Mr. Wickham. Uses and abuses women and doesn't give a fuck about it. Anyway, I don't think a lot of people care about that, but it really bugged me. So After We Collided ends with Hardin on the verge of being expelled from his college because he beat the shit out of some guy. The guy that he beat to a pulp while on school grounds is a guy named Zed. He's like part of Hardin's friend group, I guess, and he's always had a thing for Tessa. And during one of those breakup moments between Hardin and Tessa, Zed kind of like is trying to get close to her, and Tessa kisses him to like feel something, I guess. And then Hardin finds out about it, goes to the lab in the college where he knows Zed is, and then beats the shit out of him and also like ruins a bunch of like laboratory equipment as well. And he decides, you know, screw it, I'm just gonna go back to live in England with my mom, I don't want to be here. And he, in all of his entitlement, just thinks that Tessa is gonna go along with him because she loves him so much. Like, he literally says that she will follow me because she loves me. But unbeknownst to Hardin, Tessa actually has plans to move to Seattle and transfer universities there because she got a really good job opportunity in Vance Publishing. Of course, neither of them have spoken to one another about this. I'm sure that we'll get, you know, fights about that in the next book. Oh, and the very, very last thing that happens in this book is that Tessa's father, who physically abused her mom and abandoned them when Tessa was young, just randomly shows up on the street in front of Hardin and Tessa. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the next book. I will update you guys anytime the ridiculousness gets to be too much. I have a feeling that this next book is really going to test my patience. Not just because it is so long, but just because I cannot imagine how much worse it can get. Hello, and welcome back to me roasting the After series by Anna Todd, featuring my hormonal acne breakouts. I am currently 60% of the way into the audiobook of After We Fell, and what can I say? It gets worse! Let me go ahead and try to give you a little plot synopsis of what has happened, and I'm going to struggle because, say it with me, there is no plot to this book! So basically we start the story and we pick up where we left off. Hardin is at risk of being expelled from the university, and then very quickly, like all the plot lines in this book, that storyline is brushed aside and Tessa and Hardin are invited on a 1-week trip with Hardin's father, his new wife, and Landon, Tessa's best friend / Hardin's stepbrother. And Hardin and Tessa are fighting and on the rocks because that is kind of their perpetual state of being in a relationship. They're mostly fighting about the fact that Tessa wants to move to Seattle Seattle to follow her dream job and opportunities there, and Hardin wants to move back to England and continue his studies over there, and both of them expect the other person to follow them. Hardin, more so than anybody, he is extremely entitled and just believes that Tessa will willingly follow him anywhere and everywhere. And while they're there, Tessa and Hardin decide to have sex in a hot tub, and Hardin, in the excitement of the moment, forgets to put on protection. And while they're going at it, he suddenly remembers, oh hey, I didn't put a condom on. And then Tessa's like, oh, you know, it's not that big of a deal, like whatever. And then he freaks out and accuses her of trying to get pregnant to keep him around and force him to go to Seattle. So that's the thing that happens, and may I remind you that this is the hero of our story, the man that we are meant to swoon over. So then, I can't remember if it's after the hot tub incident or after another fight that Hardin just gets fed up and he walks off and just sort of starts roaming around. He runs into this girl named Lillian, they strike up a conversation, and it is basically discovered that Lillian and her girlfriend Riley are in a pretty much identical relationship to the one that Hardin and Tessa have. In that Lillian is this sweet, innocent, good girl, and Riley is this like badass chick who's super possessive and controlling. And while you may be thinking, hey, finally, some LGBTQ representation, this entire book has just been straight people. Actually, you should pump the brakes, because the only reason this couple is even introduced is to help the straight couple deal with their bullshit. At one point, Lillian tells Hardin that loving a person and feeling like you always need to be around them and can't live without them are entirely different things. She basically tells Hardin, hey, Tessa doesn't love you, she just feels like she needs to be around you. It was a little iconic. When this couple was introduced, I could see that they were obviously a plot device of trying to get Hardin to go through some kind of character development and recognize that the way he treats Tessa is wrong. Lillian was constantly telling him, like, hey, she's not gonna want to be with you if you are possessive. She probably doesn't like it when you're constantly calling her and telling her who she can and can't hang out with. Which, like, absolutely 100%, but is that supposed to be character development? Like, is this entire series just going to be Hardin learning how to be a decent person? Because I don't know about you, but that's not really interesting to me. But sadly, I have a feeling that the bar is really that low. Like, I'm really just going to watch this abusive piece of shit become a halfway decent human being, and that's going to be the entire plot. While they're on this trip, Tessa also starts flirting with and getting to know this waiter. I completely forgot his name, and let's be honest, he just disappears, because that's what happens to characters in these books. They come in, they have some kind of influence on Tessa and Hardin's relationship, whether good or bad. Most of the time it's bad, and then they just disappear, and they are never to be heard from again. Anyway, Tessa hangs out with and flirts with this waiter, and there are so many times in her own mind where she's thinking, like, he's so nice, he's so kind, he's nothing like Hardin, like, I wish Hardin would treat me this way, I wish Hardin would do this thing that this guy does. And she has a lot of moments like this with other guys in the story. A few times with Zed, a few times with Trevor, now with this waiter guy. And she likes them, she's attracted to them, and she knows in her brain that they are better people and would treat her better than Hardin does. This series should have ended after book 1, maybe book 2 at most, and it should have been about Tessa getting out of this abusive fucking relationship. That should have been the series. Also, in case you needed another reason to hate Hardin Scott, he is consistently blaming Tessa for the reasons he does things. If he's yelling at her, if he's overly possessive, that's Tessa's fault. You made me feel this way. You made me throw this bottle against the wall. You made me scream at you. It's your fault. Ding, 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 red flag. Red fucking flag, ladies and gentlemen and non-binary friends. Also, he consistently tries to control the people she can hang out with. Remember Zed, the guy who has always kind of liked Tessa and Tessa has always kind of liked him back? Hardin hates him. And, you know, I understand. You don't really want your girlfriend always hanging out with someone who she kind of has feelings for and they kind of have feelings for her. I get that. But he has threatened Tessa and told her to stay away from him so many times that Tessa is legitimately fearful when Zed comes to her office to say goodbye to her before she moves to Seattle. This girl is legitimately terrified that Hardin is going to come in or find out that she was in Zed's presence. She's terrified of what he's going to do, not only to Zed, but what he's going to say to her and how he's going to yell at her to get angry with her. Like, how does that not freak you out? How does that not make you really, really sad? Like, this made me sad for her. So Tessa decides that she's going to move to Seattle without Hardin. Incredible, amazing, follow your dreams. And Steph, who was part of Hardin's crew and was kind of sort of friends with Tessa, and now they're rebuilding their friendship, she says, hey, we're throwing a goodbye party for you. Come on over. So Tessa does. She comes to the party. A bunch of people are there that she doesn't really know. And about an hour or so into the party, she starts to feel really like woozy and out of it. She can't really stand straight. Everything's kind of going in and out. So she was drugged, and she's taken upstairs by Steph and this guy Dan. Now Dan, to give you some context, remember how in the past book, Hardin told us about his abusive history with women, how he would have sex with them and take pictures and even videos? Well, Dan's younger sister was one of those girls. And so Dan wants to get revenge by essentially doing the same thing to Tessa. As for why Steph drugged Tessa and is recording and in on this whole thing, I guess Hardin and her used to hook up, and apparently she's still bitter that he rejected her and is now choosing to be with Tessa out of everyone he's ever been with in his life. So then Molly, the girl that Tessa has always hated, shows up, and she sort of says, hey, this is not cool, let's not do this. And then Dan and Steph are like, no, we're just gonna like simulate it happening. We're not actually going to do anything, which like, it doesn't matter. Like if you drug and touch somebody, that is assault, that is violation, that is a crime. Molly leaves the room. Dan sort of starts touching Tessa's leg, and then Zed comes in. He sort of takes Tessa away. Hardin finds out. He punches Dan in the face, or kicks him in the face, I think, something like that. He and Tessa have this reconciliation a bit, I believe, after it happens. She sort of is really shaken up by it. Obviously, it's a really terrible thing that happened. But then, like every other plot line, it is quickly brushed aside and forgotten. And this is my thing about this plot line, if that's even what you can call it. It's obviously awful, and these things can and they do happen. However, this book and the books previously have consistently used violence, particularly sexual violence, against women for shock value or as some kind of plot device. In the first book, when Tessa is almost assaulted by a guy at this party, she goes to Hardin's room and then they start making out, like immediately afterwards. Natalie is only used as a way for Hardin to get absolution. He runs into her later in the book after he almost totally ruined her life, and she forgives him, just like that. You're absolved. And then now when this awful, terrible, terrifying thing happens, it's really only used, like I said, for shock and so that Hardin can hear about it and feel terrible. The sexual violence in this book is never actually about the victims. It's never about the women. It is about the men in their lives. It is about how what happens to them impacts the men. It is about how what happened to Tessa made Hardin feel. It was just a thing that happened. You were drugged. You were almost raped on camera. Whatever. You're on to the next thing. We're on to the next plot, the next fight, the next sex scene between Hardin and Tessa. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry. It just makes me so angry. Now, I can't exactly remember when this next thing happens, but eventually Tessa moves to Seattle on her own, and Hardin is left heartbroken, and he misses her so much, and oh my gosh, how could Tessa leave me? How could she choose her career and her entire future over me? Hardin goes to have a conversation with his father. Now, this is something that I have neglected to mention, but I should bring it up now. In the first book, I believe we find out that Hardin really resents his father because when he was younger, his father always drank alcohol to excess, didn't really support the family, got into a lot of fights. And one night when Hardin was very young, these men showed up to his house and they attacked his mother and assaulted her. The reason why Hardin blames his father for all this is because those men were originally looking for his father. Now, I'm not trying to take away from any trauma that Hardin may have because of what happened and what he witnessed when he was a child. I can understand completely why he blames his father and why he resents his father. But in this conversation he has with his dad and after we fell, he basically blames his father for never being around and says that his father is the reason he is the way he is. He tells him, because you were never around, because you weren't in my life, I don't know how to respect and treat women. First of all, this idea that you need a man in your life to teach you how to respect women. What? There's this really great tweet that I saw on my TL a couple days ago that just, I don't know if Twitter gods knew that I needed this tweet, but it fit this conversation and this book perfectly. And the tweet is, an abuser's traumatic/unhealthy upbringing does not excuse the harm they choose to create. And if that doesn't sum up Hardin Scott's character perfectly, I don't know what does. So let me wrap up this update by catching you guys up to where I am now, plot-wise. So Tessa has moved to Seattle. She's hung out with Trevor one time. There aren't really any romantic feelings there, but you know, he's a nice dude. They're friends. They hang out. And oh my god, I cannot believe I neglected to mention this. Tessa was trying to look for a place to live, and then Hardin, I can't remember exactly what he did, but he basically sabotaged a deal that she had to live in a certain place. You know, just textbook abusive behavior. What else would we expect from our resident heartthrob? So she is currently staying with Kimberly and Mr. Vance and their son. To remind you, Mr. Vance, obviously CEO of Vance Publishing, and Kimberly is his fiance, and she is really good friends with Tessa. Her and Hardin are kind of in this weird space where like they're together but not really together, and they're trying to like work it out long distance. They're like calling each other on the phone a lot, and Hardin showed up randomly to surprise Tessa and stay with her. So what are my hopes? Or maybe hopes isn't the right word. What do I expect is going to happen in the rest of this book? Same old bullshit, honestly. Fighting, breaking up, getting back together, Hardin being an asshole, random characters being introduced only to be thrown away seconds later. I'll come back and update you guys once I finish After We Fell, and catch you all up on the absolute shenanigans that I am sure are going to happen in the rest of this book. I am back, I finished After We Fell, and I have more notes. Tessa and Hardin are continuing this kind of hesitant back and forth type of relationship, not really together, but not really seeing anybody else. Hardin finds out that his mother, Trish, is getting married to her next door neighbor who she has been seeing. His name is Mike, he's a nice guy. And she invited both Hardin and Tessa to the wedding. Hardin doesn't want to go, but eventually he decides to go and he brings Tessa along with him. While in England, Hardin is kind of on edge. There's a lot of bad memories that he has wrapped up in England. Tessa goes dress fitting with Trish and one of Trish's friends, and while she's there, she runs into Natalie. And of course, because every character in this series serves Tessa and Hardin's relationship, the only function that she has is once again to reassure Tessa that she has no hard feelings against Hardin, and she wishes him the best, and in fact, she has prayed for him to find some kind of absolution. This girl's only purpose in the story is to be part of Hardin's past and now come back into his life only to absolve him of the guilt that he rightly should feel, which he doesn't even feel. By the way, I'm pretty sure Tessa mentions once again, just like Hardin did in the previous book, that he actually doesn't feel as bad about what he did to Natalie as he should. Tessa and Hardin are staying with Trish, and the night before the wedding, Hardin, I think, hears some noises or just decides to go downstairs, and what does he find but his mother, Trish, getting it on with Christian Vance. And I'm not gonna lie, when Hardin walked in on them, like, it was a little entertaining. I was like, okay, this is like kind of messy, kind of chaotic. I'm kind of into it. Now, it's been explained previously in the novel that Christian Vance and Hardin's parents, Ken and Trish, they grew up together, they went to uni together, they were all really good friends in the past. Christian Vance has been like a staple in Hardin's life for as long as he can remember. He took Trish and Hardin in when they were falling on hard times after his dad abandoned them. He gave Hardin his first job. Tessa is woken up by all the screaming and yelling going on. Trish is crying. Christian's trying to get Hardin to calm down. Hardin's freaking out. Tessa is obviously really upset as well because Kimberly, Christian's fiance, is a really good friend of hers, and she doesn't know if Kimberly knows about it and how she's going to react if she finds out. And eventually, Mike, Trish's fiance, walks in, and Hardin just basically in front of all of them tells Mike, hey, she's fucking someone else. So then the next day, Christian asks Hardin, can we sit down? Can we have a talk? And Hardin meets up with him at a bar, along with some other people who, I'm going to be honest, don't really matter. Hardin shows up, he's still super pissed, and at the same time, Kimberly is meeting up with Tessa at a local park to talk about what happened. Kimberly has found out, Christian did tell her. And pretty much at the same time, Hardin and Tessa find out that, what do you know? Plot twist, Christian is actually Hardin's biological father. Let me just say, I knew it. The second that he caught those two fucking, I was like, not to brag or anything, but galaxy brain. Anyway, so now that I've told you what happened, let me tell you about a few things that I really hated about this final stretch of the book. There's a lot. I've talked a lot in this video about how this book just doesn't know how to handle sensitive and triggering issues and material, but beyond all of that, the book is just badly written. You know that cute bit of advice that people give authors, like show, don't tell? Like, for example, don't write Sarah was sad, show us how she was sad through her actions, through the way that maybe her shoulders are slumping, how she won't look people in the eyes. Show us through her actions and her body language and her decision making how she's sad, don't just tell us. And this series series is all tell and no show. The constant inner monologue of Tessa and Hardin is just so cringeworthy. Hardin will be like, God, I love this girl. She drives me crazy and she's so stubborn, but I wouldn't have her any other way. And then Tessa's monologue will be like, I love this beautiful broken boy with all of my soul. No matter how much he hurts me, I just keep coming back. Like, don't quote me on that. That's not exactly what they say, but if you read this book, I was pretty damn close with that impression. And probably the most prominent technical failure in this book is that no side characters, no supporting characters in these books has any personality or development or plotline of their own outside of Tessa and Hardin. Everything that they are and everything that they do is in service of Hardin and Tessa. We have Zed. He wants Tessa, and that makes Hardin mad. We have Kimberly, who's sweet and bubbly. That's her only personality trait. Oh, and her other personality trait is the fact that she's basically this like mouthpiece of advice for Tessa and Hardin in their relationship. Even Landon, this man is in a long distance relationship that's supposedly really important to him. He really values his schoolwork and responsibilities. And yet the only times that he really shows up is when Hardin and Tessa have a problem and he needs to hear one of them out or help them. I think it's mentioned like towards the end of this book that he and his girlfriend broke up. That gets like what, 2 pages of dialogue and then he just forgets about it and it's never brought up again. Side characters should have their own desires, their own goals, their own lives. And the real joke is that Hardin and Tessa aren't even interesting enough to carry this series. So if you're gonna have every single damn character in this book be boring besides them, then you've truly given me nothing. I feel like I also need to reiterate just one more time that this book has no plot. It is a hodgepodge of random scenes and scenarios just strung together really terribly. It is so bad that every like 100 or so pages, I will just completely forget what happened previously. It's like Thanos is in my head with his giant purple sausage fingers just snapping away every hour or so. I only have one more book left if you don't count the before book, which is basically the first book from Hardin's point of view. Basically, I only have one more book left to figure out like what's going to be the ending to Hardin and Tessa's story and relationship or whatever. I'm really starting to question where this supposed character development is for Hardin. In all those comments I received on my first after video, everyone was telling me, you can't judge him or say anything about him until you've read all the books. Well, guess what? I'm almost there and I'm not seeing it. Like in this book, Tessa will say that Hardin is making so much progress, but like, is he though? Because when he caught his mom having sex with Christian, he called her a whore. And then he wasn't mature enough to step away and let his mom tell her fiance that she cheated on him. He just blurted it out and, like Tessa mentioned herself, grossly embarrassed this man. And also, even if he is becoming less angry and not punching things all the time, is that really the standard here? Is it? Is that the standard that you want in character development, that he just now doesn't punch walls and isn't a raging misogynist? He still is, by the way, but you know, not as obviously as he was before. Is that the standard? Is it? Because if so, that's embarrassing. That is just humiliating. So I'm going to go, probably get some boba, you know, something to make me feel better about myself, because as much as I hate these books, I truly do hate myself more for reading them and for doing this. But at the same time, I did bring this on myself. I did choose to do this, so maybe I'm the real villain in this story. Hello, and welcome back to a special edition of the Maury Povich Show. In the case of 21-year-old Hardin, Ken Scott, you are not the father. The last we saw of Hardin Scott, he just found out that Christian Vance is actually his biological father. In the wake of being told this information, Hardin absolutely loses it. I'm pretty sure he like throws a chair or destroys some kind of property in the bar where he and Christian are. The cops are then called on him, and then Christian takes his son for a little bit of a joyride and to explain the years of history that led them to this current situation. So basically, Christian explains that he, Trish Hardin's mom, and Ken Hardin's father, supposedly, were all part of this group of friends when they were together in university. Christian was always in love with Trish, and Trish always had eyes for Ken, and he always felt like Ken never treated Trish the way that he should have. Trish would always come to him to like talk to him about her relationship problems, and eventually this turned into a full-blown physical relationship and affair. Obviously, Obviously, Trish gets pregnant. It's Christian's baby. Christian kept trying to convince Trish to be with him. Trish kept saying no. After they got married and Ken began drinking and neglecting the family, Christian was always around. He would give Hardin books and hang out with him and just try to financially support Trish in any way that he could. The reason that Trish didn't want to be with him is because he didn't really have his life together. He didn't go to university and she didn't really think that he could provide for her and her son. And at the time, Ken was the more solid, stable option. There's more to the story, but that's really all that you need to know. Christian is the daddy. Hardin freaks out. He goes and gets ridiculously drunk, and then he shows up to his mom's house. I can't remember exactly how it goes down, but Tessa and Christian also show up, and Hardin is like ready to light the damn place on fire. Okay, the match is lit. It is ready to be struck. And he lights it. He lights the couch where his mother was assaulted on fire. So adding to the list of atrocities that this man has committed, we can now add arson. He runs into one of his old friends from this group of people he hung out with when he was young in England, who kind of like set him down a bad path. He runs into one of them and goes back to his place and starts hanging out with the same crowd of people. He's getting super drunk and high. He's not answering anyone's calls. He's not reaching out to Tessa. And he even decides that he's going to send Tessa home back to America and he's going to stay there and I guess continue on his bender. Tessa obviously is not going to accept this, so she shows up to the house where he is. She's yelling at him in front of all of these people. There's a girl sitting on Hardin's lap wearing his shirt, I'm pretty sure, and he just like doesn't care. Tessa is so hurt by this that she just decides to give up on him and goes home to America. She shows up to Hardin's apartment where she was last staying, and when she's there, she finds her father's dead body with a needle in his arm. I feel like I just said that so nonchalantly, like it's like so fucked up. Who comes up with this shit? Tessa is obviously devastated by this and she goes into a state of shock. She's not speaking to anyone, she hasn't cried, she's not even moving. Her mother and her old boyfriend Noah, if you remember the dude that she was dating before she went to college and then cheated on with Hardin, all the way from the first book, they both take her back to her mom's house. Hardin is still doing God knows what with God knows who over in England, and when he's on a phone call with Landon, he eventually finds out what's going on with Tessa and decides to come back. And when Hardin shows up and tries to talk to Tessa, tries to touch Tessa, she freaks the fuck out. She's literally like scurrying and crawling away from him, doesn't want him to touch her. She's screaming when he tries to get close to her. Eventually, after a few days of this, of like not wanting Hardin to even be around her, telling him to leave, choosing to have Noah be near her rather than Hardin, eventually she has a conversation with Hardin that I have been waiting for since the first damn book. She puts her foot down and tells Hardin that this relationship, like whatever this dynamic is, it cannot continue. She says that their relationship is toxic, that it doesn't work, that she is tired of trying to heal him and help him and just him throwing that back in her face every time and constantly disappointing her and hurting her. Like, I'm sad that she had to go through all that shit to get to this point, but I was so damn happy. Is what I wanted actually going to happen? Is Tessa going to walk away from this relationship and then the rest of the book we're going to see her like heal through therapy and reconnecting with friends and like reestablishing who she is? Is that what the rest of this book is gonna be? Because if so, I might have to change my entire damn mind about this series. But of course, that doesn't happen. Because I never get what I want. So while Tessa is officially like finally breaking it off with Hardin, he gets so desperate that he offers to marry her, which is like such a slap in the face because the past like 2 books, she's been trying to plan a future and like telling Hardin, I want to get married, I want to have kids, what are we doing here? And he consistently tells her, I don't want to marry you, I don't want to marry anybody, I never want kids. And now when she's finally plucked up the courage to tell you no, you come back and throw the one thing she always wanted from you in her face. And not because you actually want to marry her, because you're so afraid of her leaving you. The book kind of jumps ahead a bit and it goes to her father's funeral. Tessa is obviously having like a really rough time being around all these people and still grieving. And Hardin invites Zed to come and she's happy to see him. She hasn't seen him in a while. You know, they were friends even though, you know, he always wanted more and sometimes she gave it to him but then was like, no, you know, I actually love Hardin more, etc. They've got a weird relationship, but she's happy that he's there. But of course, Zed screws it up. Why? Because men are trash. If there's one thing that this book series should teach you, if there's one thing that life should teach you in general, is that men are systemically garbage. Garbage. And she obviously is like, dude, what the hell? And he just absolutely goes off on her. He's like, why do you think I hang around with you? It's not because like I just want to be your friend. Like, you're always leading me on. And now because you and Hardin are broken up, I thought it's finally my turn. Like, I'm pretty sure he legitimately says, it's my turn. Like, part of me is upset that every man in this book is trash in some capacity, but another part of me knows that this is just extremely accurate to real life. Like, I have yet to meet a man who has never disappointed me. All of them have. All of them. Ones that I've known, ones that I haven't known, every single one. But of course Hardin shows up, and then he and Zed get in this full blown out fight, and we find out that apparently when they were first starting to be friends, Zed was dating / really liked this girl named Samantha, and Hardin, just to be a dick, had sex with her. And Hardin's like, well, you only wanted to ever be with Tessa because you wanted to get back at me for the Samantha thing. And once again, we see women being used as props in ego competitions between men. Like, I don't even know this girl Samantha, but the way that Hardin talks about her, I am so sorry, Samantha, that you are being disrespected in this way. Because Hardin's like, oh yeah, like I fucked her and it wasn't even that good, it wasn't even memorable, but like you never had her, so what would you know? Apparently, the character development is coming, but oh, I'm sorry, where is it? Because I don't see it. Is she hiding in the corner somewhere? She should really make herself known because we've only got half of the last book left and Hardin is still as big a piece of shit as he was at the beginning of the series. In fact, more so. Anyway, Zed fucks off, and I doubt we're ever gonna see him again. Where I am right now, Hardin and Tessa are in this, like, weird place. They're together, but not really together, and he's trying to become, like, a better person, whatever. I don't know, like, sometimes she's like, oh, I can see the progress that he's making, and then other times she's like, but I can never be with him, like, it's just too much, like, we went through too much. Honestly, part of me gets it, because it is really, really hard to extract yourself from these kinds of abusive relationships. It's realistic, this back and forth, and Tessa feeling unsure, and feeling like she needs Hardin, like she has to be with him. Like, I just really want this book to end with Tessa just, like, on her own, trying to figure out her shit, really, really cutting things off with Hardin. Like, it's gonna be hard, but I want that for her. Like, is she a dumbass? Does she slut shame people? Is she annoying? Yes, but like, she doesn't deserve this shit. Go to Europe, don't tell anyone where you've gone, start a new life for yourself, go to therapy. Like, the final scene of the book should be her, like, walking down, like, this, like, cobblestone street with the book in her hand, sunny's on, breathing in the fresh air while hearing like laughter and talking all around her. And then that's how the book ends. I finished After Ever Happy, which means that I have officially finished the After series. And I have come out on the other side. Beaten and broken, yes, but still breathing. So let's do this. One final time, one last update, except for my final update of before, but the last update in this saga. Hardin and Tessa are still in this weird place where they're like together and working on their relationship, but Tessa still wants space, but they still have sex and are acting like a couple, and everyone around them just assumes that they're going to get back together. It's a weird position for them to be in, but they've been in much stranger positions throughout their relationship, so honestly, this is probably like the healthiest they've ever been, and that is not saying much. Tessa has been making plans to move to New York City with her best friend Landon. She's pretty much all set to go. She wants to go there, live for a year, and then eventually apply to transfer to NYU. And up until this point, she has not told Hardin of her plans. Hardin is convinced that they are going to finally move to Seattle like she's always wanted, and they're finally going to be together. He has proposed marriage over and over again. And I don't know about you, but there's something about this man finally giving Tessa what she's always wanted, marriage, moving to Seattle, but only agreeing to do it once he's afraid that he's going to lose her. There's something about it that is just like, how do you say, unhealthy? A little toxic? Tessa also has appointments with an OBGYN, and she finds out that she is unfortunately in a position where she will not be able to conceive easily. I can't remember exactly what the diagnosis was, but it's going to be very, very difficult for her to have children. Obviously, she's really upset about this. Eventually, Tessa gets around to telling Hardin about these two things that she's been keeping from him, the move to New York City and her fertility issues. I go in with such low expectations, and yet somehow still, this man continues to disappoint me. So let's start with the fertility issues. So here's the scene where Tessa tells him that she has a high risk for miscarriages, that she has kind of warped hormone levels. This word for word is what Hardin thinks. I don't know what to say to her, and I can't help the anger I feel toward her. It's fucking stupid and selfish and absolutely fucking wrong, but it's there, and I'm terrified that if I open my mouth, I will say something I shouldn't. If I weren't such an asshole, I would try to comfort her. I would hold her and tell her it will be okay, that we don't need to have kids, we can adopt or something. But this is how reality works. Yes, men aren't literary heroes. They don't change overnight. And no one does anything right here in the real world. I'm no Darcy and she's no Elizabeth. And a few paragraphs down he says, I'm pissed. Not at her, but her body and her mum for whatever she was born with that doesn't work right. I'm pissed at the world for slapping me in the damn face again, and I'm pissed at myself for not being able to say anything to her as we drive through the city. Okay, so let's talk about something first. The fact that you acknowledge that it is a selfish, horrible thing to think doesn't make you less of a jerk for thinking it. Also, that part where he says that something doesn't work right, literally fuck you. Like, fuck you so hard, dude. Hey, guess what? Women are not baby-making factories. That is not our function. So fuck you. Literally fuck you. I don't care that you apologize later. I don't care that you feel guilty about it. I don't care. You suck. Let's also talk about Hardin's reaction to Tessa telling him that she's going to be moving to New York City. Of course he gets mad. Of course he gets royally pissed. And all the development that he's gone through goes straight out the window. He gets mad at Tessa, he yells at her, and then he goes to Landon, who knew about it and is planning to move to New York with Tessa. He yells at Landon and then shoves him into a wall in front of Tessa, in front of Landon's mother, Karen, and in front of Landon's stepfather, Ken. And no one does anything. They just stand there while Hardin has Landon up against the wall and is like grabbing onto his shirt, I'm pretty sure. And Landon just says, you know what, just hit me. I don't care. And Hardin steps away and walks off, and Tessa goes after him and has the audacity, she has the audacity to praise this man for not hitting Landon. Tessa tells Hardin, I'm proud of you. He asks, for what? Absolutely logical question. I was wondering the same thing. She says, for walking away like that. I know Landon was pushing and pushing, but you walked away, Hardin. That was a huge step for you. I hope you know how much that means to him, that you chose not to hit him. The standards are on the ground. The standards are in the Earth's core. The standards don't exist for this man. So after all of that happens, Landon tells Tessa that he can't do this anymore. He tells her that her relationship with Hardin is not just impacting and hurting her, it is impacting everyone around her. And that reality check from Landon shows Tessa that she just needs to end it, full stop. Tessa and Hardin have this conversation. She says, I'm moving to New York and I want this to be over. I need you to leave me alone. I need you to let me figure out who I am outside of you with no influence from you. And Hardin agrees, but then he says, once this break between us is over, you have to promise to marry me and never be apart from me again, because we both know we're meant to be together and this little break isn't gonna stop that. That's super cute. Oh my god. The rest of the book is made up of like a bunch of time jumps. So first we see like Tessa at Hardin's graduation. Then we see Hardin coming to visit her in New York while she's working as a server and living with Landon. In one of these flashbacks, Tessa finds a manuscript that Hardin wrote about their love story called, guess what it's called. Go on, guess. Yep, exactly right. It's called After. Anyway, so there's even more time skips. We see Hardin and Tessa at Landon's wedding. We see Tessa graduate from NYU. And at this point, it's been 4 years since the last time skip. So her and Hardin have been apart for a long time. And then we see them get back together. We see them get married, have 2 kids of their own. And it's just like la-di-da, domestic bliss. And then the book ends. And when I tell you that I genuinely didn't care, like this is the problem for me, is that I was not invested in these characters individually or in their romance. So when they finally got together, I literally didn't give a shit. I didn't get my dream of Tessa living on her own in Europe in some remote location and just like thriving on her own. I didn't get it. Instead I got this. So one thing that kept coming up in this final section of the book is I felt like there were multiple points where the author was trying to talk to the reader through her characters. And what I mean by that is that Tessa would mention to Hardin, like, hey, we're in an abusive relationship. And then he would mention, that's not true. Like, I don't hit you. When have I ever abused you? Yeah, we're in an unhealthy relationship, but it's not abusive. Like, literally, that is the argument that that man made. I'll go ahead and read you guys some examples of what I'm talking about. So Hardin is talking to Tessa at this point, and he says, no relationship is perfect, and no man is ever going to treat a woman exactly as he should. He lifts a hand in the air to stop me from interrupting. I'm not saying it's right, okay? So hear me out. I'm only saying that I think if you and maybe some other people, me, in this fucked up criticizing world would just pay closer attention to the shit behind the scenes, you would see things differently. We aren't perfect, Tessa. I'm not fucking perfect and I love you, but you are far from perfect too. I have done a lot of shit to you and fuck, I've made this speech 1,000 damn times, but something inside of me has changed. You know it's true. And the second glaringly obvious point where this happens, once again, I believe this is in Hardin's head. He says, I think the hardest thing to explain is that there is a big difference between our relationship being unhealthy and being abusive. I think that a lot of people are quick to judge without putting themselves in the shoes of people who deal with this shit. There's so many things wrong with that. I don't know where to begin. I feel like maybe this author and this book was like trying to teach people that you shouldn't judge others so quickly, that you should learn to forgive people, which like, that's a fine message on its own. Like, we never really know what's going on with people. That's true. We should try to be kind until you apply it to a misogynistic, manipulative, abusive arsonist, right? Let's not forget about that. This man is an arsonist, like Hardin Scott. And like, yes, Hardin has been through some shit. Hardin has been through trauma. But guess what? That doesn't mean that you are not accountable for your actions. It is not Tessa's, Natalie's, or any other woman or victim of Hardin's job to forgive him. And whether this book meant to send that message or not, it did. It just did. Through Tessa, this book teaches us that, hey, you know all that really toxic, harmful, hurtful behavior that your partner exhibits? If you just wait long enough, maybe they'll become the person of your dreams and everything will magically correct itself. Through Natalie, we learned that the only function of victims and survivors is to forgive their abusers, to make their abusers feel better about themselves. That's it. That's all that we get from her. And finally, let me go ahead and talk about Hardin's development, which is like the main reason that I decided to make this video, because everyone kept telling me that there was development that I was missing. And you know what? I do get that. In the last like 3 hours, we find out that Hardin is attending therapy sessions. He is working on his relationships outside of Tessa, like with Landon and both his fathers, I guess, Vance and Ken. Also, that plot completely disappears. Like, it's revealed at the beginning of this book that Hardin's father isn't who he thought he was, and then it's forgotten. It becomes like background fodder. Like, no one cares about it anymore. Oh my god. Anyway, so Hardin also talks about how he like sets up these programs to help youth who are struggling with addiction and trauma. You expect these final few pages to make up for the hundreds upon hundreds of pages that I left where this man was an abusive prick. Like, I'm sorry, this guy has pulled so much shit that I could never like him. Ever. Nor could I ever want him and Tessa to be together. And I've seen this before from after stands where they say that like, oh, like the author isn't necessarily endorsing this. She's just showing us one love story about one guy and one girl. But you don't understand that this book is like a drop in the greater media that continuously tells women that you should stay in these relationships because maybe he'll get better. Maybe he'll become the guy that you want him to be. And maybe you can help him get there if you just stick with it and you just help him. Except we know that that doesn't happen. And yet it's the same narrative that we keep getting fed over and over and over again. Hello, and welcome back to the real final update in my after reading experience. And before you ask, yes, it is the same day, in fact, the same hour in which I filmed my After Ever Happy update. I only really changed my shirt to this Camp Half-Blood shirt because I needed something to make me feel happy, because constantly reading and talking about these books is draining me. So I put on my Camp Half-Blood shirt because Rick Riordan has never let me down. Before was actually, I think, the book that I enjoyed the most out of this entire series, and that's not saying much. And that is entirely because it is made up of a couple points of view that are not Hardin or Tessa at all. The book starts off and we get POVs from Molly, Steph, Natalie, and this girl named Melissa, who, if I neglected to mention before, she is Dan's sister, who Hardin slept with and I believe recorded them having sex, and then Dan is the guy who tried to get revenge on Hardin by filming a potential assault against Tessa. I like that we got to know a bit more about Molly and her background, and same with Steph, even though she is a pretty shitty person. We got to know Natalie and Melissa. Like I've spoken about multiple times before, these women literally have no function in the story besides being used by Hardin. So it was nice to, you know, finally hear them speak. And then it goes into Hardin's perspective, and we're basically seeing some of the events from the first book in his POV. It's not the entire book. We get like little snippets and moments that are like important to their relationship from the first book. And then we also, amazingly enough, get to see him justify his shitty behavior towards her because of his feelings. The main thing I'm thinking of is the fact that this man had her sign a lease with him and move in with him, despite the fact that he knew that this was all a bet and he was bribing his friends to keep them quiet about it at the same time. The final parts of the book are once again in other people's POVs. We hear from Zed, Landon, Christian Vance, and Smith, who I feel like I've neglected to mention, mostly because he isn't really important, but he is Christian Vance's son, so technically Hardin's brother. All of the POVs from these characters, once again, superior and far more interesting to the POVs of Tessa and Hardin. And then the final chapter is just Tessa and Hardin being like domestic with their kids and like, oh, happily ever after, everything's so great, everything's so wonderful. I can't believe we made it, all the fucked up shit we went went through, and here we are together, yay. Like, really, this book didn't add much to the overall plot of the story. It was nice to hear from some other characters besides Tessa and Hardin. Once again, at the end of the book, Hardin is talking about, like, his life now, being married to Tessa. He's, like, a best-selling author. He does all these youth outreach programs to talk about teens who struggle with mental health and addiction, which, like I said before, cool. That's really, really amazing things that you're doing, but I don't think that you should be with Tessa, and I don't like you at all. Like, this last minute redemption just means fuck all to me. Anyway, that's it. It's done. I finished it. It's over. Thank God. And I can safely say to every single person who told me that I couldn't judge Hardin or I couldn't judge the books because I haven't read all of them, guess what? Just read all of them. Still terrible. I'm talking about Hardin and the books. Okay, so I am going to leave you now. I will probably be back for like a last minute wrap up of all of my thoughts of this experience, but at the moment I just need to step away from all things after and not think about this series for at least a solid 24 hours. So it's been a few days since I updated you guys, and I just wanted to do a final wrap up of my thoughts both on this series and of the experience that I've had making this video. When I was reading these books, I kept asking myself, like, what's the larger implication of these books and this video that I'm making? Like, what's the goal of all this? And then that led me to question, okay, well, what's the impact of fiction in general? Now, listen, I have read my fair share and liked my fair share of darker romances. I watched the entire 50 Shades of Grey trilogy completely unironically at least once a year. I understand that for many of us, sometimes we just want to watch something and read something and turn off our brains for a second and just have some fun. But as I mentioned before, fiction and media don't exist in a vacuum. And the things that we watch, the movies we like, the books that we read, they do impact us and they do influence us whether we realize it or not. And I can't deny the fact that After perpetuates these really harmful ideas that do exist in our society and do harm a lot of people, particularly when it comes to romance and abusive relationships. And for me, After just had so many issues that I couldn't look away. Like, I couldn't switch off the critical part of my brain just to enjoy something mindlessly for a second. And the one thing for me is that I've seen so many people who like this series glorify it almost, and they say that they want a guy just like Hardin. There's merch that I'm pretty sure says, like, where's my Hardin Scott? And sweetie, the answer to that question is in jail. I don't know, like, it makes me feel icky. And it's so hard because, yes, I do acknowledge that people are intelligent and self-aware enough to read things and know that the tropes and the dynamics that they see in those romances, in those books, are not something that they would want for themselves in their real lives. Maybe you like reading about a bad boy on paper, but in real life you go for the softies and that's all that you want. Like, I am sure that there are people who can read After as a trashy romance and not aspire to have a relationship like Hardin and Tessa. But I can't help but think about how media and fiction influences us, like I said, whether we are conscious of it or not. We internalize the messages that we receive because After isn't the only book like this. Like, I mentioned 50 Shades of Grey, I'm sure I can rattle off numerous romances that are extremely popular and well-liked that do include, if not exactly the dynamics of After, some semblance of it. And I can't deny the fact that maybe without us even realizing it, yes, I am including myself in this, things that we want from a romantic relationship, what we desire, has in some way been shaped by these books and by these movies and television shows. And at some point, when we're reading these things and watching these things, we kind of have to ask ourselves, like, where's the line? And if there is a line, who gets to draw it? Honestly, I don't know what the larger impact of this book series and of this video honestly is going to be. I don't know if I'm helping by making this video. I don't know what I'm doing right now. I really don't. I'm sure there will be people in the comments who will tell me it's a trashy book. It's not that deep. Stop worrying about it. But I can't. The moral of the story here is that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And you know what? I went the whole video without mentioning this, but let me do it now. In case you didn't know, After started its life as a Harry Styles fanfiction as a former and present directioner. There was a time in the fandom, I'm gonna say like circa 2012, 2013-ish, where like dark One Direction and dark Harry Styles was like super popular. Let's be honest, a lot of fanfictions that are written about boy band members in particular tend to cast these dudes as like really dark people. I don't understand how one writes a story about Mr. Harry Edward Styles, who is like this level of perfection, who wears his little pastel suits and his pearls, and just a very compassionate and attractive person. And then you just strip him of all the qualities that make him so desirable. Like, you realize that Harry Styles is one of the most attractive and desired people on the planet because of these things. Harry Styles himself, the reality of Harry Styles, is a goddamn smoke show, a fantasy of the highest degree. And then you take this amazing specimen and you give us this? Like, that's the fantasy? Is it really? And before anyone gets upset, this has nothing to do with Hero, against him, his talent, his looks, nothing. I'm saying that Hardin Scott, the character, like, that is not it. Like, when you can have Harry Styles, why the fuck would you want Hardin Scott? And I don't know about you guys, but I just think it's really odd the way that Harry's never been asked about after. I wonder if it's like one of those things that he put on his list of like, don't ask for interviews. Like, don't ask me about my relationships and don't ask me about after. That's it. I just wonder, I'm like, what does he think of this? I finally want to close this video out by acknowledging a lot of the triggering and very sensitive material that was discussed. This is probably, if not definitely, going to be the most important part of my video. I have left a bunch of links, resources, research down in the description below related to rape and sexual assault, domestic violence, abusive relationships, trauma, and mental health. I really hope that anyone who needs these resources and services will check out those links. And even if you don't need them, I still really hope that you will take a look and maybe learn something. I want to thank you all for watching this video, especially those of you who made it all the way to the end. I still don't know how long this video is going to be, but I imagine it's going to be a monster. So thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That seems like the wrong word to use, honestly. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of the books in the After series, however many you managed to push through. Let me know what you thought of this little experiment of mine. Obviously, as you can tell, I don't even know what to think of it. Basically, I'm asking you to validate my poor decision making. Please. All of my social media links can be found in the description below, so go ahead and check those out if you would like, and I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully talking about some books that I actually liked. Bye.